Just a quick reminder for all our listeners today, if you enjoy this podcast, if you find value in it, I know you're going to want to check out my latest book, The Culture System. It will give you a proven process for creating a culture of strong relationships and high standards, and it will make it simple and almost effortless to do that. I've developed a systematic approach through my work with over 70 coaches and hundreds of their seasons. The Culture System is available now at Amazon all across the world. If you go to myculturesystem.com, you can get links to all the different international sites where it's available. Mental wellness, emotional intelligence, mindfulness, self-awareness. These are buzzwords today in education, sports, and leadership. However, it doesn't seem everyone has a clear definition and understanding of what they are and why they're important. What's really clear is that few people have proven tools and methods to help develop and grow these things with adolescents today. Today, though, we've got Lynn Kachmarik on the podcast to share with us some proven concepts, tools, and methods for working on these things ourselves as leaders first, and then working with our athletes on these things. In episodes 120 and 121, we had Lynn on the podcast talking with us and sharing with us some ways that we can become more aware of our personalities as well as the personalities of the individuals within our team, and then how to move beyond our personality and to develop our character. We got so much out of our conversation with Lynn back then that Nate and I actually flew to Portland to spend 3 days to be trained by Lynn so that we could provide those workshops on self and team awareness. I've got no doubt you're going to enjoy her enthusiasm and find a lot of value in today's episode of the Coaching Culture Podcast. So welcome back. I'm JP Nurbin, the founder of TOC Culture Consulting and the author of The Culture System. I am joined by my friend and co-host, Nate Sanderson. You can learn more about us at tocculture.com and get the notes to this and every episode of the podcast by subscribing to our weekly newsletter. Don't forget to subscribe also to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and share it. Share it with others in leadership. Every week, we give you practical tools and strategies to grow as a leader and build your team or organization's culture. And we try to do that the best we can in around 30 minutes. Now, let's get right into our conversation with Lynn. I think one of the things that excites me the most and kind of like leading up to our conversation today was, how I think you're actually really get into the things that are probably the most important things that we could be talking about with young people. I think our problem so often in sports, not even sports, and education, and just the way that we're raising people today is that we're so focused on talking about the doing. Like, hey, what do you want to do when you want to grow up? What are your goals? What do you need to do to achieve those things? It's all about the doing. But what I'm starting to see here is that you're really focused on the being. You're asking them these questions of who are you and who do you want to be or who do you want to become? So I was just kind of curious, why has this become so important to you? And I thought maybe you could explain a little bit more about how you're approaching and young people today and asking that question more and more.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me back. And I am excited to share this with you because as you know, I've been a coach at all different levels for over 45 years, and I've continued just up until recently to coach. And as I continue to mentor and work with youth through adults, my passion for sport hasn't changed, but my passion to help them with some of the biggest issues that they're all facing right now, understanding who they are, where they're going, and their mental wellness, how to move through their emotions and their thoughts and feelings in healthier ways. Because as we know, I listened to all of your podcasts and everything does come back to relationships and emotional intelligence. And so nothing has really changed for me except my passion, not coaching individuals right now in a sport, but just helping them to understand who they are and where they're going and how they can get there in healthier ways is really foremost for me.
You mentioned that stuff around, mental wellness and emotional intelligence and relationships. And sometimes those can feel a little bit like buzzwords that we just hear a lot of people, talking about. What are we missing? What do you see that's missing out there when it comes to the approach that we're taking with young people? Like what go deeper down. What do we really need to be talking about when it comes to mental wellness and emotional intelligence?
I'll tell you, in my research, which is a lot and ongoing, we haven't taught, including myself, we haven't taught. I certainly didn't get this from my parents. I didn't get this from some of the best coaches in the world. I didn't deliver this to my athletes at a national team level, to Division I at Bucknell for 20 years, to recent high school and youth, how to move through their emotions, what their emotions really are. I didn't understand this process, something that we're going to get into today. Moving from, most of us are taught how to blame when we don't get what we want, when we don't feel good, when we're unhappy. We blame other people and we unclaim our emotions instead of this process that I am now teaching and mastering myself, how to name, tame, and aim your emotions so that you move through life in a healthier way. I said to you a little bit earlier, these are buzzwords. And so I just didn't want to I was like really searching, reading as much as I can and, where I was in my career in terms of mentoring. And what I realized with working with high-level coaches and athletes is, my gosh, whether they're a 16-year-old high school kid or they're a 45-year-old coach, none of them know how to manage what disappoints them, what frustrates them, their anger in many ways. And so I took some steps back and got connected to a great program called Inner Challenge.
Well, Lynn, I want to pull on this thread a little bit here of name it, tame it, and aim it. And I'm going to put you on the spot here. Now, we've got an audience full of coaches. And in some of the materials that you had sent us ahead of time, you mentioned that oftentimes for young people, their model of emotional intelligence or emotional regulation is their parents. And I would imagine that coaches in a sports context have quite a role that maybe we don't even understand how influential we can be in terms of what we're modeling when it comes to just what you're describing there, our own ability to be able to take responsibility for our emotions and handle them in an appropriate way. So I'm going to challenge you with this. Do you think that you could put together for us a scenario of a coach who encounters some kind of an emotion and kind of walk us through what it would be like for that coach to name it, tame it, and aim it in a healthy way?
I can, but I just want to preface this with that it is a learned process. Just by, giving some basic information, it's not going to impact them the way they would to do a deep dive into this. So, that's what I hope that they do. And this information is out there, but this Inner Challenge program that was created by a great friend of mine who's a therapist and has worked on this. She's been a therapist for 45 years and worked on this program for over 28 years. That's the difference between just kind of walking somebody through it and really doing a nosedive. But just to kind of jump on that our parents are the number one educator in helping us, kids, youth, learn how to manage their emotions, but they don't know this process as well. So I've been adding some of this information to my parent education, and parents raise their hand when I say, how many of you blame and unclaim versus how many of you name? And 99% are putting their hands up with blaming and unclaiming. So let me just give you a quick example. A referee makes a call, right? We're in a time space here where we're losing so many great coaches and great officials because of reactions from coaches and reactions from parents. And so an official makes a call. And I don't know about you, but I want coaches to manage their emotions, because we know research tells us that the top contributors to bad sport behavior on the courts, on the fields, are reactions from parents and reactions from coaches. So if a coach reacts to a call that an official makes, that just sets in motion some more increased stress. that their own athletes are going to feel. So to manage that, okay, bad call happens. They learn a process that they're not learning right now. We take you through it, and it's hard work. I'll be honest with you, Nate. It's hard work because it's this mindfulness and understanding that your feelings are not facts. And actually, your emotions are sensations that you feel in your body. And we feel something before we think. So we can feel that I'm angry, right? I feel that I'm angry. So this process helps you research tells us that if you can stick with a sensation or an emotion or a feeling for 90 seconds, right? So in the heat of the moment of a game, coaches can't scream out, right? That's exactly what we're trying to get everyone to understand, the difference between reacting in the heat of the moment and responding. And so what I know, and others, is that if you can sit with that emotion for 90 seconds, you have a great chance of moving through it in a healthy way. And so we have a process where we teach you, okay, think of a story. So I want a coach to think of that worst call, right? They're in the heat of the moment. That worst call happens. But I know, and you know, if I explode on that referee, that's a lose-lose, right? In every situation, we want to have a win-win. And exploding on a referee is a lose-lose. It's a lose for you. It's a lose for your team. And it certainly isn't a win in terms of your relationship with the official. So if you can learn how to feel that emotion in your body, so some of us feel our sensations in the same place. Others feel them in different places, depending on what the emotion is. For many, it takes practice until you can even feel a sensation in your body. So once you learn this process, you can feel the sensation, you name it, that's anger. You play in your mind this moment in a movie that caused you to feel anger. You replay this over a 30-second increments. And the last time you actually bring into it other, colors, sensations, where you might feel it. And then part of the process is, and you don't have to do all of this, but put your hand on your body where you feel it. Breathe for 30 seconds. If it's anger, you're breathing out the emotion of anger. If it's joy and it's passion, we teach you how to breathe in the emotion, which is aiming your emotion into your heart, because your body actually craves the positive. So for the negative emotion, you're breathing it out, which is aiming that emotion out of your body. And when it's a great emotion, we teach you how to aim and breathe it into your heart to bank it for those times when you need to pull on it a little bit more. So anything worth having, it's like practice, right? You have an elite team. I don't care how good you are. You have to practice the skills, and you have to practice the grit, and you have to have a recovery system, right? When you make a mistake, I teach kids how to recover quickly from that mistake. That's the grit, recovering with your confidence intact. It's the same thing with mindfulness and understanding how to move through emotions in a healthy way.
Yeah. What I love of what you're talking about is that it's kind of a retraining. We have to really retrain ourselves here, because we have been programmed, through our own experiences to react in certain ways here. And so what I think is really interesting, which I've learned, just here listening to you, and then I've started to really dive into some of the research myself, is when I used to hear name it to tame it, I used to think that, okay, that's JP's angry at the call. And now I train myself to be calm and like I'm Buddha. And that's not it. It's more like taming it. You can still tame this wild horse and it still runs freaking hard. It's not a calm horse. It's in control.
Yes.
And that's what I love what you're saying here is name it, tame it, aim it. Like it's like, I don't have to be Buddha on the sidelines. It's just, I'm in control. And then I'm focusing my energy that comes from that stressful moment, that bad call, that anger, and I'm focusing on that. And it's really on the next best action is what I'm assuming the AIM it stands for in
Yes.
in the inner challenge framework. So
Yes.
I love that because I think that's the biggest misconception in all this whole like name it to tame it and stuff is that we think it's like, oh, we're all calm, and that's not
No,
it.
that's not it at all. And I know both of you guys have experienced e-colors and personal intervention where we talk about moving from a reaction to a response, and it's the same. It just extends. That's why I love high levels of self-awareness. And then I move into this because research tells us that the more you understand your personality and your tendencies, the better chance you have of managing your anxieties, your normal anxieties and stress. Now you add these other factors that come in, and we are teaching your brain and retraining your brain how to move from a reaction, a sensation, to a reflection, which to me is another way to look at personal intervention that really makes sense when you start to understand. So many people, and especially in our world today, people are, it's tough. People are sharing all the time what they feel, and they're making it seem like it's a fact. But feelings are not facts, right? Sometimes they do align with the facts, but a lot of times our feelings do not align with the facts. So let me give you an example. I've been taking, I took a young water polo player from Canada through this program in the beginning of her season. And her story was she got pulled out. She's a starter. She's an amazing, one of the top players, youth players in Canada. And she got pulled from a game and she was furious on the bench. And she was blaming the coach and blaming her teammates. And, she actually said something, which again is that personal intervention piece. And she reacted to the situation. But when she did get back in the game, she was a mess. She wasn't even in the right mind to get back in there and help her team. Now, we've been working on this, and I just had a meeting with her not too long ago, and she goes, "Oh my God, Coach Lynn, it works." And I said, "Tell me more." And she said, "I got pulled out of a game, and not 1 second did I waste. I put my hand on my heart because that's where I knew you had trained me. I felt anger in my heart. I got on the bench, and I know one of my teammates was looking at me like, what is she doing? But I put my hand on my heart. I took some breaths. I breathed out my frustration, and I just sat with it for 90 seconds, and it was gone. I was cheering my teammates. I was so ready to get in. And I just really thought, man, oh man, this is what we all need. I've been working with collegiate athletes and high school kids, and they're all looking at me like, why didn't anyone teach me this? And I look at them and go, the same way I didn't teach my own kids who are your age. I didn't know this process.
I love that because it makes me think of even something I did and said this morning as we were getting the kids off to school. Like gosh, why did I say that? There's something I remember hearing recently. Not everything I think needs to be said. Not everything I think is true. And not everything I think is actually what I think. And that was kind of my moment this morning. I didn't really feel like the feelings take over. And I love how you've given us an actionable thing that people can implement.
Well, this is part of it. Again, we're kind of jumping around, and there's a really easy process that flows through this naturally. But think about it. When you're teaching all of us, feelings are not facts. We don't have control over what we feel, but we do have control over what we do with our feelings if we learn how to manage them in a healthy way.
Yeah, and I want to push on that just a little bit too, Lynn. I was watching a Netflix series here on the bike the last couple of weeks. I just binge and pedal. This is my new thing, right? So
I do too.
There was a line that one of the characters in the movie, just runaway kid, and kind of is living with a stranger in a van down by the river, essentially in this show, and she's confronted by her family, and like, what are you spending your time with this loser for, and why have you run away, and that sort of thing. And she says, he's the only guy that cares about how I feel. And I thought that was such a powerful line, and now thinking about the role of the coach in understanding a little bit of this process and being in a place around young people where, as you mentioned before, it all comes back to these relationships, right? Where we can position ourselves in a way, I think, not just to model, but also to be able to start to help them through, whether it's interventions or it's just, somebody that's there that understands kind of the struggle as you're going through this process. But can you talk a little bit about how, the emphasis on relationship along with these learned skills can be a game changer for coaches?
Yeah. Like I said, I've coached for 45 years, and I wish I knew what I know now with my learnings, even 2 years ago, even, my most recent high school inner city coaching. But I think it's so important, Nate, that we do a deeper dive as coaches into what is this life stage that the age group that we are coaching is working through, right? So if you're working with a 12-year-old to a 25-year-old, they're working through this life stage of answering the question, who am I? Who am I? And this is why I think it's so important for all of us to talk and have teams. What are your individual values and what are our team values that we're going to move through as we move through the season? What do we value? Because when we don't know what we value, we can be led astray, right? So when I talk to kids of collegiate athletes, this just happened last week. I walked into a room full of male collegiate soccer players, and a couple of guys were there first, and I said, "Tell me about yourself." And the guy says, "Well, I play soccer." And I was like, "I know that you play soccer. Tell me more about yourself." And so I know that I'm kind of going back a little bit, but I think it's so important because every time I bring this up with any team of any level, I want to talk about their real self and their performer self. And I want coaches to understand this, right? Their real self is their authentic and deepest self, right? The real self longs to be developed for the good of yourself and others throughout their lifetime. But so often when I ask athletes, and including myself, I was on the United States women's national water polo team for 10 years, and I put my performer self before my real self. So the performer self isn't somebody new. It's just an extension of their real self, which develops and uses their talents. The choice of how we use these talents is one of life's biggest challenges for all of us. And so many of our youth and coaches who don't understand this, and we're, I was part of some huge emotional abuse when I was on the national team back in the day. We're talking about the late 70s and early 80s. That there's so much out there. It is about relationships. It is about connecting. It is about loving every single kid that you're so privileged to coach. But every act, there's a response. There's something that happens. And when our athletes don't understand that their real self is so much more important than their performer self, everything about this over competitive community that we're all coaching in screams that their performer self is more important than their real self. And so hence we get kids who are setting goals that may not align with the team goals. I want to be the biggest scorer. I want to set the school record this year in scoring. But so that player is focusing on putting that ball in the rim or scoring in soccer or water polo instead of, wow, there's an open pass I should have made. For me, I had an eating disorder. I developed an eating disorder back in the day when nobody talked about it, didn't know what it was, but my coaches were adamant. She is not going to be good. She's not from California. And I had nowhere to go with it except internally. And for 10 years, I put my performer self before my real self. And I think this is such a basic concept. I will tell you, when I talk with kids, athletes at any level, they're like, no one has ever talked to us about this. So as basic as, inner challenge is, that's really at the core, getting them to understand that when a coach, maybe somebody does have a coach that is really, emotionally abusive to them. I don't want someone to suffer for 10 years with an eating disorder that could have killed me. And there's cutting, there's crazy driving after a practice. There's a response, there's a reaction when we are abused. And I want coaches to understand how the real self of every athlete that they're coaching is so much more important than their performer self. We say that, but I don't think most of us understand what that means.
Let's imagine this. You get to go coach Lynn, playing on that water polo team, Lynn who puts her performer self in front of that real self. How do you coach Lynn? How do you coach Lynn through that period of her life? What were you missing as an athlete that they need now?
Yeah. I needed love. I needed to not have someone, and again, I put up with it because I wanted to make the national team. I wanted to go to world championships. Think about that with so many of our kids, right? I want to make my high school team. I want to make varsity. I want to make my collegiate team. So we do put up with a lot of things that shouldn't be happening. So what I want coaches, there are so many great coaches out there who get this, but there's so many coaches out there who don't. And we have to coach from a base of love and understanding what that age group needs at that time in their life to move through their sports season in healthy ways, emotionally, physically, socially, spiritually, all of that.
There's something so profound here that what we're kind of building towards in this conversation, which I think is one of the missing pieces of mental wellness, which is really what we're trying to achieve within mental wellness. And I sometimes think we're trying to sell people on like, well, mental wellness is when you're happy and life is easy. And, it's this thing that actually does not exist. For me, I look at mental wellness as peace because I'm living in accordance with my values. There's an alignment in that. And that's only when and it doesn't mean life is going to be easy. It doesn't mean I'm not going to face adversity or difficulties or stress or challenges, but I'm going to, throughout that, be able to have the character, the courage, like you talk about, and the other, character type skills to be able to live in accordance with my values. And when I'm doing that, I can truly find peace. And I think the other kind of comparison I remember, looking through some of your resources was this idea around external mindset and internal mindset. And I kind of feel like that internal mindset is what you're driving at. You're trying to help players have this certain type of mindset where they're able to live with the character and live with that's necessary to live in accordance with their values. I was wondering, am I right in that? And if you could unpack that a little bit for us.
So think about it. I used to just, when I was, just go for a run, work harder, train harder. But mental wellness is an inside and outside job. It's an inside and outside job. And one of the biggest gifts that comes from an adult brain is the power of reflection. And so our youth don't have an adult brain. It's 25. And so it's not as common or natural for those high school athletes that we're coaching, and even the collegiate athlete, to learn how to reflect. So one of the things we talk about is, what is an inner workout, right? Because you need both. So taking a mindful walk, journaling, breath. It's so funny because my coach was so ahead of time. So ahead of the time back at Slippery Rock, where I played water polo and swam, and we'd be up above the pool and we would be doing mindfulness. And my personality style is one where I don't stop moving. I'm constantly interrupting and poking people. So he'd have us on the mat and we'd be doing mindfulness before people even knew the value of it. And I would be laughing or giggling or disrupting. So he would say, Lynn, go down to the pool deck and just get the pool set up for practice, which is exactly what I wanted. So then I go through life without knowing how to be mindful. Not his fault, my fault. So breath practice, prayer is an inner workout, quiet reflection, talking to someone about your inner world, what is truly going on, mindfulness exercises that we teach during this inner challenge, meditation. And so I want kids to understand, what do you do as an inner workout? This whole part about, adolescence is this life stage, their job. And if coaches don't know that their job as adolescents is to answer this question, who am I? How can we truly coach them at the highest level that we're called to do? We do this by cultivating self-awareness, not shutting kids down. We want to help them to develop their talents to make the world and our teams better places. So that's a huge part of it. We have to teach kids what feelings are. And then this whole concept of external mindset and internal mindset, they have to understand how to get there. And it's just not something that comes overnight. It takes practice, right? This internal mindset is tending and befriending your emotion. And the external mindset is blame and unclaim.
Well, and there's no doubt we could go on and on here throughout the day and just continue down this road, because there's so much to be learned and so much to be applied and so many tools for coaches, that, as you mentioned many times, and we just seem to lack, and not necessarily our own fault. We just haven't been exposed to that training or those ways of thinking before. And so if there are coaches that are, teased a little bit by some of the things that you're sharing here, and they're interested in getting in touch with you, you mentioned how you've been doing trainings all over the world with athletes at all different kinds of levels. Your experience is pretty much unmatched, as far as that goes. What's a good way for coaches to be able to follow you or to be able to get in contact with you?
Well, that's why I love your web, people. I've reached out to some of your previous speakers to grow just like they can with me. Lynn, they can just contact me at lynn.kachmarik@equilibria.com. I know you guys can connect them to me. I also want to connect them to a free website that they could go to. I'm not saying they have to bring me in. I'm the only person trained outside of the creator, MJ Murray Vachon, of this program. MJ has created a free podcast that, and each podcast is about 20 to 25 minutes where she walks them through. I took her podcast and created 3 little workshops from it. You can extensively do it, and you can go and learn as a coach the information so that you can better manage your own stuff and really kind of see, how can I bring this to their teams? So they should just Google mjmurray.com inner challenge, and her website will come up. And for free, they can listen to a 20-minute podcast and download a page with incredible information of, pictures, really easy to follow. So, they can do that on their own. Reach out to me via email. My other email is lynnkachmarik@gmail.com. I absolutely, I want to get this information out to people. I'll share, work together, because, here I am in the later part of my career. How is it possible that nobody taught me the real easy skills to move through my emotions in a healthy way?
All right, we'll have Lynn's information and the details of this episode. She is always so generous with her time and quick to get back to coaches. So if you want to explore this some more, be sure to reach out.